Welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound, and as usual we like to give you some of these people that should gain more attention than they do because their art should gain more attention than it does. So I'm very happy to have Sally Gates here with me. So Sally, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. For everybody who has not yet read the review that we put out on the record, Sally is, just has, at the time when you are watching this in November, has just released a new record with two more musicians. And maybe you say who it is, because otherwise it sounds like a wet dream that I just made up.
Yeah. So it's a record with Trevor Dunn and Greg Foxx. So as many of you may know, Trevor's from Mr. Bungle, and Greg has a very prolific career as well. He's played on many different records and many different genres. So yeah, it's definitely sort of a dream team too.
It definitely is. It is also a dream team in the sense that you are speaking about hallucinations, which to me are nothing than, let's say, consciously noticed dreams, right? So in a way, what does your record for you have to do with hallucinations, Sally?
So the way it relates to hallucinations is the way we actually perceive reality. So this project kind of came out of lockdown. So during that time, I was reading a lot about consciousness and quantum physics and neuroscience and a lot of very nerdy stuff. But I came across this one lecture by this neuroscientist, Neil Seth, and he was talking about the way your brain generates reality and perception. And he's saying essentially, you take the information that your senses are giving you and it hallucinates its best guess of what's going around. And the way he put it was perception is a controlled hallucination and hallucinations are uncontrolled perception. And so that really resonated with me. I mean, I'm also really into like surrealism and sci-fi, and I love like Philip K. Dick's books, like A Scanner Darkly in particular, just like sort of messes with reality and how you're perceiving things. And so I kind of, I was thinking a lot on this concept and how if we have these certain limitations on our perception, it's essentially there for our survival. Like if we had essentially, like if we saw what was there, which is all, vibrations and waves, like everything down to the tiniest particles, it's all just depending whether you're looking at it or not, it's a solid or it's a wave, or if we saw things how they are like that, we're not going to get very far as a species. We're just going to be like, whoa, look at all these pretty patterns, So I started linking that to music actually through these sessions with Trevor and Greg. So when we initially got together before the recording, we sort of jammed a lot at Greg's studio, and initially we were just playing free, and then we started messing around, like saying, oh, what if we focus more on form? We're improvising, but like sort of if you pick up on this one idea, maybe we can turn this into like an ABA structure, or let's see what happens if we set a timer for like 2 minutes 55 seconds, or like just kind of putting these limitations on that. And then so I started noticing once we did that, like the music became a little more coherent. And so if you relate that to perception, like you have these limitations or controls or cues, then you sort of end up with more of a musical survival, if you will,
Which is very interesting, because I think that to the, for lack of a better word, for the untrained ear, the music that you three came up with still sounds very hallucinating, and it takes a few spins to recognize the underlying structures, because you three are able to bury them way down under a lot of layers of microtonalities, of free jazz improvisations, and you've already mentioned it. So it's basically a mixing of both, right? Control and free form. But then my question is, how do you keep track when you perform this in the studio or on a live stage? How do you keep track in your mind of where you are right now?
I guess I do that visually. I can't speak to the other guys, obviously, but I mean, like I said, like music and art are very linked for me, so I kind of have like sort of overarching concept while we're playing. Um, Particularly, you know, like if there's a form in place, you know, like you're sort of very aware of that. Sometimes with the timer, I mean, I'm not always consciously thinking of what's going on. I mean, that's also not the point. Like you want to just be just sort of really present in the moment and just let this sort of stream of consciousness happen musically. Um, so it's a little of both, I guess, like just letting it happen or thinking about it, but sometimes thinking about it can be detrimental. um, yeah, but also with like using the timer, like particularly for the shorter pieces, that definitely help things sort of become more like succinct and coherent because you're like, oh, I have to say what I need to say really quickly. And but then some, you know, it takes you by surprise and like the time is going off and you're like, oh, we're right in the middle of that, you know.
So when you composed those tracks, did you think of single tracks, or were they in your mind chapters of an overarching theme and topic?
I guess more chapters because, you know, we did 2 days and we had hours of material. So the idea was just to kind of like edit things down and take the best bits. So um yeah, I guess it was more just thinking of like maybe sections, like how quickly can we get to some kind of musical idea that works and isn't just noodling.
Well, noodling makes it sound
Yeah.
so simple. It's simply not. Um, and it already starts with the cover of the record, which is a very interesting combination of order and chaos. And one half of it, I don't know if it's just an accident, but one half of it reminded me a lot of Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica. Is that an incident, or is it just, again, my version of reality?
I guess that's your version. Yeah, yeah, pure coincidence if that's what it triggered for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the artwork was a really fun process too. I mean, it was like you said, it was created in a similar way to the music, and that um, you know, Trevor and I collaborated on that. Like I started it, like I put down these sort of basic geometric forms, and then he added the collage, which I guess is the more chaotic part, and then we would sort of talk about and pass it back and forth and add layers, and so it was, you know, it was very collaborative but also intuitive in nature.
So you have already spoken about the recording process. So, and you've mentioned that you had hours of material. So how did you then condense it into those, what is it, 10 tracks? How did you condense it into that this limited number of tracks? And I think it's a little bit more than half an hour. So how did you?
Yeah, a lot of listening and editing. So, you know, I was the one that kind of like initiated the project, so it was on me to, you know, follow it through and do that. So I just, you know, I spent a lot of time, um, you know, listening to all the material and then just kind of like marking parts that I'm like, actually, I think I remember like categorizing each take by, like, I ended up just color coding on my laptop and just saying like, oh, this one's kind of metal, this one's more abstract, this is drum and bass or whatever, you know. So just kind of organizing it by like feel, and then, you know, like editing down, like saying what's actually like, you know, musical here, what's listenable, like what do I like, you know, and then yeah, so just like a lot of narrowing down, and then we went back to Colin and, you know, he edited it and mixed and pieced it together for us.
Mhm. And you have just mentioned color coding and how you try to sectionalize and compartmentalize the tapes and the music that you had. One question that must come up is is music a synesthetical experience for you?
I guess a little bit, yeah. I mean, like the way, I mean, not literally, more just like theoretically, you know.
Yeah.
Um, like the way I compose, you know, like um, I'll have like a lot of images in my mind, like, oh, this part needs to sound like it's melting or bending, or like what do ripples sound like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or um, for example, like in my other band, Tachyons, there's this disintegration part, which is inspired by um, Dali's painting The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory, where you have, you know, like all the melting clocks, and then there's another version where they're just pulled apart into cubes, you know, and so um, I sort of think about that, like if we have this motif, like what happens if we start to pull it apart and make it more angular and abstract, and so there's yeah, definitely a lot of crossover.
So you're taking an abstract painting and try to even abstract that a little more. That sounds, and now for everybody who has not listened to the record, it sounds more abstract than it does because the whole record still has, and that to me is maybe the most impressive feat that the record achieves. It still sounds as if it's one kind of flow. And the interesting thing is that it seems to me, or to my ears, it flows a lot like free jazz, which, as we all know, basically has no real limitations. And you say that you put limitations on it. So then one question must be, how skilled must one be, including you, including Trevor, including Greg, to be able to make something that is controlled sound like it's not? How difficult is that? And how good must you be at your instrument?
um, that's a good question. I mean, I think yeah, I mean the skill level like to improvise, I mean, I think like you know, just having a basic grasp, obviously like technical skills, but I think generally like improvising is more just like sort of an outpouring of everything that you absorb. Like it's just like an amalgamation of what you listen to, and it's coming through in this like subconscious fashion. So there's not necessarily a skill level there, but just mostly like a degree of listening and intuition. And obviously, you know, like the more skilled you are, the more practiced you are, the better you're able to articulate yourself.
Is it then the way that the three members of this project needed to have some kind of similar catalog of what they listen to, or do you prefer it if the influences that you're amalgamating, that those influences are very diverse from person to person?
In our case, I mean, we had a bit of both. Like we all have some common ground, like you know, playing metal and rock and experimental. But um, part of the reason I think this trio works so well is the differences too. You know, like that's how you get interesting ideas coming in, and you know, you create something new with that. Like I do a lot of like gigs in the city here where I'm improvising with different people, and one thing I love to do is just put together groups where like we've never played together before, or everybody's like got very different backgrounds, and so you get like a lot of, it gives you a lot more ground to explore together, like figuring out like, oh, what is this person's voice like and what can they do, you know.
Mhm. So could you imagine putting even more vocals onto a project like this? Because, well, most of the music is instrumental.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to work with a vocalist recently. I had a week at the Stone, which that's, for those that don't know, it's this residency program that John Zorn curates in the city here. Um, and you get to put together, it's like 4 nights over a week, and you get to put together like whatever you want, like different groups or projects. You just present your music, you know. Um, and so the first group I did for that, we had the singer, she goes by the name of Andromeda Anakia, and you know she's incredible,
Which is
like
a
she can do
perfect.
everything.
I already love that stage name. That is cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, so like you know she can do everything from like you know like opera to death metal growls to these crazy like diamond glass type noises and everything in between. So like she was incredible to work with, and that was actually the first time I would improvise with the vocalist. So that was a really fun experience for me too, like just figuring out what we can do with that and how the guitar can interact with that. And yeah, and I believe we made somebody walk out in the first 5 minutes. So for for a place that's like known for crazy experimental stuff, I feel like that was an achievement.
Well, tick the boxes. Had audience completely out by 20 minutes. Yes, it sounds like. So then you basically also really like to challenge your audience.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
I guess it's more about challenging myself, and hopefully they come along for the ride.
I guess what you mean. I just think, it must be really difficult to impress and also to annoy in a way, to surprise and annoy people who are going to such a place, where musical anarchy is the norm, right?
Yeah.
And that also leads me to an idea that I had while listening to the record. I always thought to myself, okay, this is in a way musical anarchy at first listen. And then the question was, for me, is this kind of musical anarchy, quote unquote, is that for you a form of liberty?
Yeah, definitely. I played in metal bands for like the first part of my career, and like pretty much all of that, everything's completely composed, everything's on a grid. There's not like a lot of musical freedoms that you can take there when you're just playing the same thing every night, and it just kind of comes down to muscle memory, which it's not a bad thing. I mean, there's so many bands and musicians that operate like that, but for me, like stepping out of that was definitely liberating, and helped me find my voice on guitar, like with just writing music and just taking these risks and seeing what else can be done. And the other thing I like about it is like once you step off that grid of composed music, like you like I was saying before, like you really have to listen and react, and like it just makes you a lot more present and objective, because you never want to come from a place where you're just playing for your ego, like, oh, let me just shred all over this and show people what I can do. It's like, it's a collaborative thing, and you want to play for what's best that's happening in the moment right now. And sometimes that's even not playing, like it's like stepping out, like you don't want everybody playing all at once all the time.
Mm. So is that also for you the contrast between musical action and silence?
Yeah, it can be, definitely. Especially, if you have a group, even if it's a duo, but like it's always good to like be aware that, it's okay to not play, like it's okay to move yourself. Like if you don't, it's kind of when you're talking to someone, if you don't have anything to say, then don't, shut up.
Yeah.
So it's
what our mothers always tell us, right? If you don't have anything good to say about a person, say nothing.
Exactly.
You have mentioned that duos or trios or however, how many people in a band. So performing for you is never a solo act, right? You don't see yourself working with a loop pedal and however else you want to do it. It's always at least a minimum of you and another person.
I actually do play solo. It's just, rarer occasions. And I have a Digitech Jamman looper that I use. And it's actually how I got into improvising. Actually, was I was living in Miami for a while, and there's like a big noise scene there, and I was playing in metal bands there. But then one day, like this guy that he books a lot of gigs. He's like, "Oh, you're playing next week," and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have you down for a solo set." And I'm like, "Ah, what do I do?" But that was great. Like it really. So yeah, I like when I play solo, I work with the looper, like I build layers, and Actually, last year I got a commission from the Wellington Jazz Festival in New Zealand to write a piece for that, and
Mm.
I played solo, which was a great experience, and it was amazing. Like I got to play the opera house there, like just me, which um yeah, it was a pretty big contrast to my last gig there, which was with a grindcore band, So yeah.
So it does not have to rely on the interaction with another musician. Does it have to rely on the interaction with the audience?
Not at all. I mean, it's yeah, I mean not in my case anyway. I can't speak for other people improvising, but yeah, I mean it's more just you're just expressing yourself in the moment, and if the audience is into it, great.
Do you ever look at the audience, or do you really get lost completely in it?
Yeah, I mostly get lost. Like, um, and I've noticed actually when like for me to concentrate, I generally just like sort of look down at my hands, even though like I don't need to, and it's like terrible stage presence, but that's just kind of like this bubble that I get into.
Mhm.
And but I also like I'll look up at the people I'm playing with too, like, you know, occasionally, but yeah, generally I'm just in a little bubble.
Could you imagine taking this trio and this record on tour? Like a real tour, not a few one-off
Yeah.
performances, like a real tour.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to do something like that actually, and it's just usually just comes down to a matter of like scheduling because
Mhm.
yeah, Trevor and Greg are very busy people. So
Yes. Um, when looking at the global scene of free jazz guitar bands, projects, however we want to call it, over the last couple of years, there has been a wonderful, totally cool rise of impressive female guitar players. Um, is that something that you feel a part of, like all the other greats that have been putting up amazing shows lately and gigs and records?
I mean, I definitely feel part of that community. I mean, there's a really strong hub for that here in New York, and it's great to see so many more female guitarists and musicians coming through. Um, like when I was growing up, I mean, I only knew one other girl that played guitar, and so it's really great that we have such support now, and like it's more commonplace, and um, but yeah, I mean, there's amazing guitar players in the city here, and I mean, like obviously, like Mary Helverson, Wendy Eisenberg, Ava Mendoza, um, Jessica Ackley. I mean, she moved to Hawaii, but yeah, it's just so nice to have that now, like have this community of other females doing the same thing.
And that is interesting that you mentioned this whole East Coast scene centered around New York. And at the same time, there is also this global thing where you, for example, in Norway, have a lot of great female guitar players and bass players like Hedvig Mollestad, Guru Mo, and loads of others. Um, is there any explanation for you why, let's say, since the 2010s, why this uprising and cool movement has come to life that well for female artists?
I think generally it's just kind of being acknowledged through different music outlets and
Mhm.
foundations and what have you. Like that it's just sort of being acknowledged that like we need to support women more and make that more prominent and seen. So I think it encourages more people to come through. Um, I can't really say why that happened so recently because I mean all these people like we've been playing most of our lives. It's not like 10 years ago we were like, oh, let me pick up a guitar. So um yeah, I really couldn't explain that too well.
Yeah, but I just found that interesting because there are so many great female guitar players at the moment. But it's really great to see that coming up. Let's get back to the trio. You said that you have initiated this project. So how did you approach these guys? Did you already know them before, or was it just like, hey, I want to work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I already knew both of them. I played with Trevor before. Like we had a gig, I think it was back in 2017. We got invited to play together, actually in an improvisational context. And then, we just stayed in touch. And then he played on a different record of mine with Tachyons. And Greg, I think we met at a show, probably like St. Vitus or somewhere, and then decided to jam together. So then, actually, speaking of Ava Mendoza, she had a she had a record release show back in 2019, and she asked me to play a set. So I was like, oh, like this might be a fun group to put together, So I called them up and made it happen. And then, of course, like COVID happened and all that, and so coming out of it, I was just kind of thinking of like, what would be fun to do musically. Like I just wanted to get back out there and playing with people again. So I thought it might be, interesting to see what else we could do with this group.
So are there already plans that go beyond this record with the three of you? That you can dispose here world exclusively on Veil of Sound?
Yeah. Not as yet. I guess I'm just doing one thing at a time. Like we have the release show coming, like, so the record comes out on October 20th, and then we have a release show here in Queens on the 25th at Sundown Bar. And then I don't know, I guess we'll see what happens beyond that. I mean, I'll definitely, probably book us a few more gigs and see what we can do with it. But yeah, I guess time allowing, would be great to record again or something like that.
I mean, like, you still have hours of material, right? So but then what is next for Sally after this? What is the next endeavor in which we can encounter you and your art?
So with my other band, Tachyons, we have a lot of shows coming up. Like in November, we have gigs with Ulcerate, Spotlights, and then next year we're going to play Biggest, which I'm really excited about. So we'll be booking a few dates around that. Probably like, maybe a 10-day tour kind of thing. And then, yeah, just mostly focusing on writing for that band. And I also, not sure how much I can say about this yet, but I also have a short film score coming out, which it's like sort of a horror comedy, which was a lot of fun to write for. So
how difficult is it for you, who loves improvisation and who loves free form, how difficult was it for you to score a film, which of course always has the limit of it has to fit to the actual scene?
I mean, I wouldn't say it always has to fit. I mean, sometimes, you just have pieces that just get laid over the top, and then yeah, I guess there's two approaches to that. Whether you just write a piece and you give it to them, and then they put it where they like, wherever it fits, or if you actually score to the action, like score the cues. But yeah, I mean, like for Titans, that's mostly composed. I mean, there's definitely like sections where it's improvised, but there's like a lot of written material, so that's nothing new for me to actually write. But I kind of love scoring because like my approach to that is like, I guess writing any music, like I sort of begin by improvising, and then you just kind of like narrow down what's working. And like with this film in particular, like I have actually right here, I have this MIDI controller, so I would just play on the keyboard, just improvise over it, and then just really hone in and like just chop out notes, just make it really minimal, like it, see what was effective and then build layers over that. So I really enjoy that process.
Interesting. I was just thinking about this idea that you've mentioned, like improvising and then chopping and chopping and chopping. because to me that is always something that I have not yet applied to the idea of free improvisation. But of course, it makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
You go.
Oh, I was gonna say it's kind of like a Occam's razor approach,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, and maybe that's also one of the reasons why the new record, it has a certain appeal that to me that I still cannot really explain, which is a cool thing, you know, like making a music journalist, quote unquote, so speechless in a way. That is a feat if somebody does that to me. That's also an appeal, and I think that the appeal is also a little bit in discovering the record. Is that also music that you like? Things that are not clear at first sight, where you have to dig in and unravel the layers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love it when I discover new music and I'm just like, what the fuck was that? You know, like let me figure out what's going on there. And but yeah, I think like I mean sometimes, you know, music just grabs you right up front, but then sometimes things have to grow on you and you listen to it and discover it more, you know.
Hmm. So what was the last discovery or the last musical discovery that you had that did that for you?
That's a good question. Can't say I've felt like that for a while. So I mean,
Okay.
yeah. So please send me musical recommendations, you know.
Sprain, 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 sprain. Record of the year.
Okay,
First of all,
great. Thanks.
because the cover is a cover of Genesis. You know, it's a little bit like the Lamp Lies Down on Broadway. It even has a similar name, and the record is. I'm gonna go big here. It's the best indie record that this decade will ever have.
Oh wow, that's a huge recommendation.
It is. It is.
So,
I have been
yeah.
listening to this record now for like 2 months in a row. It's like it
Oh,
doesn't leave. So that would be my last time that a record grabbed me and I still had to dig in and find a lot of stuff.
there was one that did I mean, other than like you know discovering John Zorn or Bungle or stuff like that back in the day. There's another guitar player here, Brandon Seabrook, and he has this incredible record, Die Fatale, and it's just I mean I you know I loved it from first listen, but it's just there's so many layers to it
Mhm.
and it's very chaotic. I mean he's an incredible guitar player, but it's something you just have to listen to. It's just like control chaos in the best way, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. So when you say control chaos in the best way, did you also like this kind of hardcore music like Dillinger, Escape Plan, Yakuza, and all of that? Was that also something that you liked and grabbed you by the throat back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, I love Dillinger, and I mean, I sort of got into metal backwards, I guess. Like, I mean, I came across like black metal and war metal, and when I was probably like 14, you know, and then like maybe a year or two later, then I was like, oh, Slayer, Metallica, you know, kind of like um, yeah, it's sort of like de-escalated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, bands, you know, like Today Is the Day, Cryptopsy, Morbid Angel. Um, those were like some of my favorites as a teenager, you know. So
Mhm.
definitely, you know, that influence obviously comes across in a lot of my music, like the heavier side of things.
Mhm. Yeah, that's also something that strikes me when listening not only to the new record but also to Titan and to other stuff that you have put out. It's never free jazz show offy. It has a lot of crunch, and that is something that I really like. You've been speaking about influences and musical influences. Are there also other things that influence your writing, your music? I mean, you've spoken about
Do
this
you mean,
neuroscientist.
yeah, so outside of music, like I guess like films and books
Mhm.
are a huge thing for me, like particularly, you know, Kubrick, David Lynch, I also mentioned, you know, Philip K. Dick. Um, Even, I mean, like I grew up on Red Dwarf. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But it was like this Brit comedy sci-fi show.
Mhm.
So I don't know, I guess like I just try to, like take, I guess I sort of look at composing as soundtracks in a way too, like I'm trying to like compose to these visual images in my head, and sort of express whatever like atmosphere or feelings those are generating. Um,
That's very interesting, because that's something that you hear from a lot
like
of
the first
musicians.
Titans record.
That is something that you hear from a lot of musicians, that films are a huge influence. And then again, from a lot of the musical sides, a lot of people go back and mention a lot of the classics. That is very interesting. Do you think that your music has benefited from your move to New York?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I feel like I've grown immensely since I moved here. Just throwing myself in head first and playing with whoever I could. And I mean, we're so lucky here. Like, there's the best musicians in the world are around us, and a lot of them are open to collaborating and playing or teaching or whatever it is. So I just kind of like embraced all that, and definitely, it definitely influenced like Titans. And I mean, just linking up with like Matt, Kenny, and Trevor for that. Like I couldn't ask for better bandmates. Like I'm so grateful to work with people like that, and they, they really encourage me, and they challenge me, and they help me learn. So it's amazing. And I was working in a music school for a time before 2020, and I mean, I was initially, like I was just working in the office, but then like they knew I played guitar, so they would pull me into classes, like if they needed a sub, which, is they're just teaching jazz standards, and which, I was trying to learn, but that's not something I have much experience in. So like that was a really good kick in the ass for like just sight reading and like learning how to navigate like soloing over form and all that. And I've enjoyed Latin jazz class through them, and so it was just an amazing experience, just like absorbing all this and then churning it out into my own music.
So when did you move to New York?
2018.
Do you now already consider yourself a New Yorker?
Yeah, I got wouldn't say that, but yeah, I'll definitely be here for a while.
I can imagine. So this new record, and that's also where that is my last question, Ted. I've already asked it. You said that you could see yourself doing this live and doing this on stage and on a tour. If you could choose 2 or 3 projects to open for you, or maybe also an act that you'd like to open for with this trio, which 2 or 3 acts could you see yourself going on tour with?
Oh man, just general wish list would be Secret Chiefs 3.
Yeah. Sally Gates top 3 wish that I could play with list.
Yeah. Yeah, also I mean like like Zorn too is another another big one. It's a good question.
But for Zorn, you probably see yourself as a support act, right?
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, for our record release show, I mean, we have this might help answer the question too. I mean, I have like Zoe Amber and Chris Corsano doing a duo, and then this new band, Antinomy, I think is how you say it, which is some good friends of ours, Jack Lynch and Danny Shear. It's like a guitar and drum duo thing. So those are kind of like some favorite acts of mine that like I thought would work well with this group in that show.
So, Sally, first of all, thanks for all those already very, very interesting insights into the record, into the way that you wrote, performed, recorded it. But nobody leaves a Veil of Sound interview without having to go through the horrible quickfire question. You will always get like two alternatives. Let's say like, yeah, Naked City versus Painkiller, or Queens versus Brooklyn, AC versus DC. And you have to choose one of the alternatives and give a short explanation for your choice. You have mentioned your love for sci-fi literature. So Philip K. Dick versus Isaac Asimov.
I have to go with Philip K. Dick.
Okay.
Because I like, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really read any Asimov, which is, but from what I've sort of heard about, I guess it's more like sort of classic sci-fi space robots. But I don't know.
Yeah. But
But I just like the paranoid angle to Philip's writing. You know, like it's like just generally those issues of like what is reality, what's actually happening. You know, like I just love those kind of like psychological twisty bits.
that is also something that still goes with your record, right? This question of reality. Would you say that reality is never the same for two people?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's such a subjective thing, you know, and actually to quote Anil Seth again, one of the things he said was like, you know, like we're generating reality through hallucinations, and when we agree on these hallucinations, we call it reality. So like we both agree, like, you know, like that's red, you know, but it's, you know, you never know for sure how somebody else is perceiving things. Like it's just it's fully subjective.
But where then does fact come into play in this? I mean, like, reality is reality for each and every one of us. It's different, true, but facts are facts. Where do you then place those?
I guess that's maybe more of a philosophical question, like, you know, like is the universe solipsistic, or are we all a collective consciousness, or you know, it's just totally going down the wormhole. But I mean, this is even, I mean, it's all like theoretical, but it's also based on facts, like you know, like what neuroscience is telling us of how, you know, like we're perceiving all these like frequencies that are coming at us, or you know, so it's like it's based in science, and then just kind of like morphing that into theoretical questions or art or whatever it is. You know, it's just more, you know, things to think about. So ponder.
Let's get back to our quickfire. Slayer versus Metallica, and Metallica only the first 4 albums.
Slayer.
Okay.
Because Rain and Blood, you know.
Oh yeah. Okay. Fantomas versus Mr. Bungle.
I think I'd probably have to go Bungle. I do love Fantomas.
I would also go, I mean, like, I think the 2 Bungle albums, first 2, are just beyond everything. Some classical guys from the 70s who tried to take structures way ahead. Pink Floyd versus Yes.
That's another one where I gotta admit I haven't listened to Yes. So have to go Pink Floyd.
Okay.
But I mean, like, I love David Gilmour. I mean, he was one of my first guitar heroes, you know.
That's also something that people tell me a lot. And I can understand that. I've just never been a huge Floyd fan, but I can see why. But jazz side, and let's step away from the guitar for a moment. Miles Davis versus his old bandmate John Coltrane.
I guess Coltrane.
Two extreme forms of metal. And here we're back with the guitar, of course. Morbid Angel as a symbol for death metal, or Baffery as a symbol for black metal?
Do you mean which is a better symbol, or
Yeah, no. Which one would you prefer? And maybe you can also then clue up which genre you would prefer. Which of the bands? Which of the genres?
Between those, I would go with Morbid Angel, but as a genre, I lean more towards black metal.
That's a very diplomatic question.
Yeah.
We've spoken about like unusual forms of hardcore. And you have spoken about Latin jazz classes. So at the drive-in versus the Mars Volta.
Probably Mars Volta.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite record of theirs?
No, I mean I don't know too much of their catalog, and same with At the Drive-In. So, but I feel like from what I've heard, like the Mars Volta kind of get more out there and weird. So I would
definitely. I still say that the first record is a total masterpiece. Die Laust im Comatorium, wonderful. You've spoken about your love for art, and two couples for that: Salvador Dali versus Pablo Picasso.
Sure.
And just your personal taste. One cannot know all of their works.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love Dali, but lately I've been leaning more towards Cubism, so that's points for Picasso. But I guess overall I'd go with Dali.
Okay. Jackson Pollock versus Edward Hopper.
Ooh, interesting one.
I just chose them because they both work so close to where you live right now. So.
Oh. I guess I have to go with Pollock because it's just that sort of free expression thing going on, and challenging what people think is art.
Yeah, definitely. Two directors, and here we come to the movie side of it all. Which Kubrick movie do you like more, Clockwork Orange or 2001?
Oh man, those are definitely my favorites. I think like visually I love 2001, but I think just generally as a movie, Clockwork Orange, and I also love the soundtrack to that, which is it's one of my favorite movies.
And you've also mentioned David Lynch. So, question: Lost Highway or Twin Peaks? A movie or a series?
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks?
Twin Peaks, I mean.
Okay. Yeah. And if you had to choose between Kubrick and Lynch, is there a possible favorite in there? Or do you say like, nah, can't choose?
Yeah, that's a hard choice.
I know.
Yeah, it depends what mood I'm in. You know?
Yeah, true. So, Sally, thanks for the wonderful chat. Thanks for the interesting answers. I cannot recommend the new record by you and Trevor and Greg more and more and more. It will stay with people for a long while if they really listen to it. So if you like this interview and if you have not heard their record yet, please change that immediately. If you like the record, go ahead and buy it. Of course, Bandcamp, wherever you want to get it. Don't listen to it too much on Spotify. They don't get anything from it. If you like this interview, then maybe give us a subscription. If you like our work here, then you might also check out our website, veilofsound.com. You might check out our regular socials. And if you like us a little bit more, maybe go to our Patreon, support us a little there. And now, Sally, your chance for final last words.
thanks so much for having me on the show, and thanks to everybody that's listening. Like you were saying, please check out the record, get it from the Riverworm Records Bandcamp. And if you're in the city, we'll see you on October 25th at sundown. And yeah, thanks again for your time and the great questions.
You're welcome.